On Christmas Day 1993, the seminal film Batman Mask of the Phantasm was released in cinemas. While the film is beloved by Batman fans now, it didn't exactly set the world on fire, with very poor box office results. At least until it was released on VHS and DVD in later years, when it became something of a hit. I have to imagine that if you're watching this video, the chances are you've already seen the film, and depending on your age, you probably watched it on VHS or DVD, or heaven forbid, streaming platforms. But do let me know in the comments if you were able to see it in the cinemas on its first run back in the day. Before getting started on the synopsis of the film, I wanted to post a short plug for a project I worked on earlier this year, where I brought together storyboard artist Brad Rader and sequence directors Dan Reber and Kevin Altieri to create a commentary track for Batman Mask of the Phantasm. Warner Brothers have never officially put together a commentary track on any of the releases of the film on physical media, so I figured it was up to us to make one. I really enjoyed sharing some never-before-seen artwork and cut sequences, as well as hearing Brad, Dan and Kevin's anecdotes from working on the film. If you are a fan of Mask of the Phantasm, I recommend checking it out, and no, it's not monetized, so there won't be any adverts interrupting your viewing experience. We just made it for the love of the film. So to participate, just pop on your copy of the film however you own it, load up the commentary track on a separate device, press play, and enjoy. Now back to your feature presentation. If you've never seen Mask of the Phantasm, for God's sake go watch it now. To talk about the film, I am going to have to spoil the plot behind it, so this is your final spoiler warning. Mask of the Phantasm is a dark, atmospheric murder mystery thriller, taking established characters from the beloved Batman the Animated Series, freeing them from the shackles of the TV censors and placing them in a more mature story. Why, within the first few moments, we've seen a lot of things that weren't allowed to be shown in the TV series. Batman comes crashing in through a window and punches someone square in the face. The gangsters are drinking alcohol, have suggestive portraits on their office wall, and pull out realistic firearms, which they fire directly at Batman, by the way. For fans of the show, this immediately tells us that the kid gloves are off and we're about to get a more adult story. Now, that's not to say that Mask of the Phantasm is gratuitous, far from it still has a PG rating after all, but it's an even more authentic Batman experience. The core narrative is about what the loss of loved ones can do to us, the depths that we might plunge into in order to make things right, and the folly of revenge. The main storyline involves a case of mistaken identity. When a new vigilante turns up in Gotham and starts murdering elderly gangsters, Batman is blamed. After all, who else wears a big black cape and skulks around in graveyards at night? The Phantasm's identity is kept secret for the majority of the film, and there are a few plausible suspects presented to us. Firstly, there's Arthur Reeves, the politician who's too quick to blame Batman for the murders and builds a political platform for him to campaign off of. It's entirely plausible that he might have been the killer and was looking for a patsy to take the blame. In fact, the Joker comes to that exact same conclusion, as he has first-hand knowledge of Reeves' past involvement with the mob. Perhaps Reeves wanted to remove all of the people that knew about his past misdeeds. Then there's Carl Beaumont, the father of Andrea Beaumont, Batman's long-lost love. It's not immediately disclosed that he had actually been murdered years ago, but along the way several false clues are planted during the flashback sequences. We see that Carl has a business arrangement with the gangsters, and he's clearly not happy about it. Calling it a business arrangement is perhaps a bit generous. Carl was just as much of a criminal as the gangsters he was working with. He embezzled their money. He was clearly a con man that tried to get away with stealing from the mob but was caught out. This resulted in his death and Andrea's life being ruined, resulting in her adopting the identity of the Phantasm. Now, one of the questions I've seen fans ask about the Phantasm over the years is why she never returned to Bruce, even after her father died. And I think quite simply it was a matter of pride for her. You see, Carl Beaumont presented himself as a wealthy, successful businessman, but in reality, he was a con man who paid the price for swindling the mob. Andrea could have gone to Bruce right there and then and explained what was going on. He doubtlessly would have paid the gangsters off, but it would forever tarnish Andrea. The irony is that in leaving Bruce and fleeing the mob, Andrea would be damned anyway. Eventually, the mob tracks Carl down and murders him while Andrea is out grocery shopping. She returns home just in time to see the pre-acid bath Joker, then known as Jack Napier, leaving their home. It probably would have been more merciful if Napier had killed Andrea too, but he got a kick out of distressing her and letting her find her father's body. Look how nonchalantly he walks away, picking up an apple that Andrea had dropped before taking a bite. He's symbolically taking a bite out of her world, and thus the Phantasm was born. Andrea would return to Gotham years later to kill gangsters that murdered her father. She starts with Chucky Sol before moving on to the creep Buzz Bronski. At this point, Batman starts to investigate the gangsters' murders and stumbles upon Andrea at the graveyard. Following this confrontation, Andrea heads out to murder her next victim, Sal Valestra, the man who ordered her father's death. Unfortunately for her, the Joker had already beaten her to the punch. And this brings her into conflict with Batman, who it's important to note at this point she knows is Bruce Wayne. Andrea recognised Batman at his parents' graveside, and it gave her a lot to think about. From this point, Andrea is entirely on the defensive when facing Batman. She doesn't want to hurt him and instead uses her smoke to escape, conveniently just as the police arrive. However, Andrea cannot allow Batman to be harmed by the police, and so she turns up in her civilian identity to provide Batman with a way out. At this point, Andrea opens up to Batman, explaining the events that led to her departure, conveniently misleading Batman, telling him that the Phantasm is her father. Despite opening up to him, easy now, Andrea can't help herself from lying to him. She has to know that he's going to figure it out eventually, but I suppose she wants to relive some of her happier days before she commits her final act of revenge, killing the Joker. During the commentary track I recorded, Brad Rader showed how the Phantasm had been stalking Sal Valestra, watching him from a distance and discovering the Joker's hideout at the dilapidated World of the Future theme park. There is a not at all subtle metaphor in this film about the World of the Future, a theme park that Bruce and Andrea visited on a date once that showed their possible future. Bright, shining, loving. But in the present day, the theme park has been abandoned, it's run down and is now the home of the Joker. The metaphor here is the theme park is representative of their lives together. In the past, it was bright and glorious, filled with possibility, but in the present, it's a decrepit ruin. The animatronics have become deranged and the Joker is at the centre of it all. I've talked about this in depth in one of my first video essays that I released, so go ahead and watch that if you haven't already, just forgive the low resolution footage and the basic audio. While Batman spends much of his time trying to capture the Joker, Andrea is determined to kill him. However, when Andrea confronts the Joker at the World of the Future, he immediately calls her out and she unmasks. This scene demonstrates that Andrea isn't exactly a master of the martial arts. She brutally attacks the Joker, kneeing him between the legs and beating him about the face. Without the ghostly mask of the Phantasm and her assorted tricks, she is at a disadvantage. While Andrea is very similar to Bruce, she didn't have the same resources and time to dedicate to training. Yes, she's an effective performer, able to use deception and misdirection to get the drop on her enemies, but when it comes to a hand-to-hand fight, she's probably not going to win. After narrowly avoiding death by an oversized fan, with the gigantic oversized props being a clear callback to the Dick Sprang era of Batman comics, which was a nice touch, Andrea is confronted by Batman, who has finally pieced everything together, but he doesn't react with anger or betrayal, even though he'd be well within his rights to feel that way. Instead, he pleads with her to stand down. The reason for this is Batman is all too familiar with feelings of wanting revenge, but he knows that it's a dark path that is very hard to come back from. At the film's climax, after Batman and the Joker have crashed through the globe at the centre of the amusement park, another not so subtle metaphor, Andrea has the Joker in her hands poised to kill him. However, a series of explosions go off, destroying the theme park. Oh, there's that beautiful metaphor again, before both she and the Joker disappear in a plume of smoke. Batman was narrowly able to escape from the explosions, and when he couldn't find Andrea, he assumed the worst. Back at the Batcave, Alfred delivers a powerful speech about how vengeance blackens the soul, and how he had always feared that Bruce would fall into that pit in his pursuit of justice. Andrea, meanwhile, fell into that pit years ago, and there's nothing anyone could have done to save her. While Batman feared the worst, that Andrea had died, in reality she had escaped. With her revenge now complete, Andrea leaves Gotham on a ship, sailing off into the darkness. Andrea looks back at everything she has lost and despairs. Batman, meanwhile, stands tall atop a skyscraper and heads off on his next adventure. Alright, so that was a pretty long-winded synopsis. There are a couple of other things that I want to highlight that I think are exceptional about this film. Obviously, the cast is wonderful. We know this because much of the cast was also wonderful in BTAS. Kevin Conroy delivers some of his finest work, particularly in the scene in which Bruce pleads with his parents to be released from his vow. Before his untimely death, Kevin Conroy had recounted how his own life experiences had influenced that performance. While in the recording booth, he recalled a time in which his father had attempted to commit suicide when he was a boy, and how he had sat by his hospital bed pleading with him to recover. This is a common technique for actors, to reach inside of themselves for real experiences that create the necessary reaction in them. But it was so wonderful in this film. Voice director Andrea Romano recalled that after the scene was complete, she had to go into the recording booth to give Kevin a hug, because he clearly needed it. Dana Delaney is also a revelation as Andrea Beaumont. She's smart, sassy, quick-witted, and furious. It's no wonder then that Andrea Romano wanted to work with her again, casting her as the DCAU Lois Lane. And then we have Hart Bochner, a slimy politician that just oozes grime from every pore. I'm told that he's a really great guy, but he is exceptional at playing a smarmy leech. And if you recognise his voice but aren't sure where you've seen him, he played Ellis in Die Hard. Then we get to Stacy Keach, who's great as both Carl Beaumont and the Phantasm. As Carl, he has a rich, reassuring voice, while as the Phantasm, his voice booms. Hearing him say,
"Your angel of death awaits,"
will resonate within my head for the rest of my life. Abe Vigoda, probably best known for his role in the Godfather movies, plays the aging gangster Sal Valestra. Again, a terrific performance, especially in his scenes opposite the Joker voiced by Mark Hamill, who is always the best Joker hands down. There's a really neat contrast between the more natural and realistic performance of Vigoda when compared to Hamill's high energy and deeply sinister Joker. It's a really neat way of summarising how much Gotham City has changed in the years since Batman appeared. Gone are the days of brutal men in suits. Instead, Gotham's crime scene is ruled by homicidal clowns, poisonous plant women, and shape-shifting mudmen. I want to wrap things up by talking about one of my favourite things of the whole film, and that's the music. Now, BTAS is well known for having an exceptional score, but Mask of the Phantasm takes it to another level. I don't think it's controversial to say that Shirley Walker's theme is the definitive Batman theme. For God's sake, James Gunn, just reuse this theme. The indecipherable chanting from the opening credits actually consisted of the names of the people that worked on the film, including members of the orchestra that weren't allowed to be credited. Now, this was Shirley Walker's way of bypassing the rules around the credits and ensuring that everybody was credited for their hard work. Speaking of the music, and I want to share a potentially controversial opinion, I actually quite like the end credits song, I Never Even Told You by Tia Carrera. Yes, it is one of the most obnoxiously 90s song of all times. Just listen to all of that sax. It makes me want to whip out my Tamagotchi from my bomber jacket pocket between playing a few rounds of Pogs and drinking some Sunny D. Oh God, I think that's probably the worst thing I've ever said. It's not the 90s references that I enjoy about the song. I'm not actually much of a fan of that decade because I grew up through it and I remember it being kind of sucky. No, it's the fact that lyrically it reminds me of Andrea Beaumont. I've heard critics of the film, including pals of the channel, the Bat Minute podcast, go check them out if you haven't already, being critical of the song, but I strongly disagree, and this is the hill I will die on. In my mind, I Never Even Told You is a song about Andrea. Bruce thought she had left him because her dad had told her not to marry him and she didn't really love him. The truth was that she and her father fled for their lives from the mob and had to leave Bruce behind. Andrea carried Bruce's photo in a locket close to her heart for all of those years. It's one of the few possessions that she brought with her to Gotham. She clearly loved him dearly and thought he knew, but he clearly felt abandoned by her, and that abandonment took him right back to Crime Alley, watching his parents drown in their own blood on the filthy streets of Gotham City. She had no intention of doing that to him. If she had had her way, she would have married him, but life had different plans for the two of them. So in a sense, I think the song is very appropriate. Musically, yeah, it's dated, and I find the saxophone to be an incredibly distracting instrument. As such, it feels a little bit off. But I still love it. So I've teamed up with frequent collaborator Cat Strike to produce a cover of the song that's a bit more melancholic and abstract. And I'm delighted to close this video off by sharing it with you now, along with a very basic music video that I think makes the point I wanted to make. Happy birthday, Mask of the Phantasm, and take it away, Cat.
There was never any question, any lovers in discretion in my eyes. And my quiet desperation isn't any indication that my life suddenly could change. I feel so ashamed. I never even told you. I never even said no word. How I feel about you. I thought you knew. to say. And my silent desperation couldn't change my situation anyway. Does it strange how everything can change? It's still the same. I never I couldn't whisper, no, I couldn't say. Now I know this cost, my chances are lost. Like tears, tears in the rain, just washed away. I never even told you I thought you knew. I never even said